Jeff Passan just dropped a huge article about the offseason. The New York Mets were mentioned 15 times, and there is some crazy stuff in there. We've got a list of players that are looking to be possibly on the move. We got some Kodai Senga news. We got Pete Alonso news, Edwin Diaz, Kyle Tucker news with the Mets. There's so much to cover in this Jeff Passan article about the New York Mets. It's great. A lot of good stuff here. We're excited to do it. Make sure you're subscribed to the Mets'd podcast. Most of you watching are not subscribed. Click that sub button so you don't miss out on all the content. We're going to just be dropping content randomly throughout the offseason. So you need to subscribe so you don't miss out on that. And follow us on all our social media at Mets'd. All right, James, we read this article. Where do you want to start? Should we just start at the first mention of the Mets?
I mean, we can even go through every single mention for the Mets. Just like Mark just said, Mets were mentioned 15 times. Only team mentioned more with the Dodgers at 17. The Yankees were only mentioned 9 for comparison.
Yeah, because the Yankees ain't doing shit this offseason.
This is a Mets-heavy article. I think the biggest takeaway is that there could be a lot of player movement on this team.
Yeah, one of the exact lines that Jeff Passan put in this article is, the Mets are blowing up plenty, which is a crazy sentence. And I think when a lot of Mets fans probably hear that they could be theoretically blowing it up, it's probably like sirens, cheap David Stearns at it again, operating like Milwaukee. We're going to cut payroll. I don't think that's the case. I think it's more about that this core that we've had here for better part of 6-7 years now hasn't won anything, hasn't reached sustainable success. Maybe it's time to start looking at some new pieces, bringing in some fresh faces, getting some different players in here. And that, in this article, kind of says that. So let's start off with the first mention, which is about Kyle Schwarber, funny enough, and the New York Mets. That the Mets are interested in Kyle Schwarber, and that Passan's like, if they were to steal him away from the Phillies, it would be just a straight-up coup.
And I think that's another relevant thing about this. Mets are mentioned with every single big free agent.
Yes.
So, some of that's, of course, like Jeff Passan being like, oh, the Mets. You never know about the Mets. But also, I think some of these, maybe there would have to be a lot of shedding of players to actually make some of these happen, because the second mention is that don't count the Mets or Yankees out for Kyle Tucker. And that's the fact you can hear the Mets be connected to both of those guys. 1, cool. 2, don't really buy it. 3, a lot of the roster has to change to acquiesce these very good hitters coming onto it.
Yeah, I would be shocked if we actually had any chance at Kyle Tucker. What makes us have a chance is having the most money in baseball, obviously, with Steve Cohen. But at the same time, this is kind of like what the Dodgers have done in the past, is like, get a good player, we'll find a spot for him. We don't worry about how the roster looks right now. We'll figure that out later, go get the best guy available. And while Kyle Tucker is not Juan Soto, he's not one of those top 10, top 15 players, he's a damn good baseball player. Top 20, probably top 25 in the game. Has the ability to get even better, still in his physical prime. I would love to have Kyle Tucker on this team. It also then bears needing to move Brandon Nimmo, who was also mentioned in this article as a guy that the Mets are definitely looking to trade this offseason.
That's a big part of it, too. Let's just skip to the trade section now, all the way down. Because we'll wind up getting to every single 15 mentions of the Mets in this article here by Jeff Passan. But there's an interesting part about trades. It's all the way at the end of this piece, all the way after all the free agents. And it's after a whole thing about Tarek Skubal. And then this is the exact line that Mark alluded to before. The Mets are blowing up plenty. It's not just Luis Angel Acuna or Mark Vientos or Brett Baty. Center fielder Brandon Nimmo, which is funny, he's being called a center fielder, who has a full no trade protection. Utility man Jeff McNeil could also be had. So I think it's an understanding right now of the fact that, like we talked about during the season a lot, the edges of this roster are not really that malleable right now. It's a very strange roster configuration for the Mets. Lots of slow corner guys, no defensive positions, no lacking athleticism. Similar thing is slow, but I'll say it again just to reiterate it. I don't think David Stearns wants that in one of his teams. I think that kind of shown through last year. He said over and over again with the defense, just kind of shed any kind of weight and then see how we can fit new players in to be different archetypes but similar roles.
And similarly in this article, any of the guys that have been mentioned as possible movers or guys that are not a part of this team are either not elite at their position or they're not David Stearns guys that were in this organization before he ever was a part of it. And while we like Brandon Nimmo, we think Jeff McNeil can be a valuable player this year. The injury stuff is a little weird, but at the same time, like you mentioned, James, they're older players. They're getting older. They're not going to get any more athletic than they've already been. And the athleticism's already taken a complete decline with both of those guys being Nimmo and Jeff McNeil. So it's one of those where I think if the right move is available, and we've kind of mentioned this all off season long, the Mets should and probably will be aggressive to try and move them. The biggest kicker here, though, is with Nimmo, that full no trade clause. If he just wants to be a New York Met for the rest of his life, which he very well might, there's a good chance it doesn't matter what the offer that we get back as Brandon Nimmo stays here.
No, and there's also part of it too where I think that similar to players that we just mentioned that are available in Kyle Tucker and Kyle Schwarber, the Kyles, just getting a guy like Brandon Nimmo off the roster, who, while Nimmo isn't a bad player, we've never said that. Nimmo's still a good player. He's a good player.
Yes.
And Nimmo, there's probably a lot more you can do with a corner outfield spot than Brandon Nimmo, given the types of players that come available every single winter. When we signed Brandon Nimmo to that long contract, there was the hope and expectation that he had more years in center field, honestly. It seemed like he could have had like a nice 4 or 5 year run, probably even been able to play there last year. But the way his athleticism has declined, the way, like we've talked about every episode, like you say, Mark, moves like a tin man, like it's just kind of who is at this point. I want to ask you about the inclusion of Brett Baty in this list, because some of this reads like Jeff Passan casting a very wide net for a lot of these teams. We'll talk more about some of those rumors as we get through it more, but I'm curious about Baty being lumped in with Acuna and Vientos, and just Baty being a trade candidate otherwise.
I'll say two things. One, I think that this is a classic. Like, if this is 100% true, right, that Baty is available, it feels like the reason being is if you're going to go get an elite player. Like, if you were going to get Terry Skubal, maybe you're able to move Brett Baty and a lower prospect that still has some hype rather than moving on from some of your top prospects. So maybe that's part of the enticing part here for the Mets to consider Brett Baty being available. It doesn't really make the most sense to me for him. Like, those other guys, there's clear reasons why they would be available. Brett Baty would be maybe cashing in on what could be the highest his value could be right now. That's where I see that. But also at the same time, not trying to take a shot at Passan here, but because those guys have been so synonymous with each other over the last couple seasons coming up together, it feels like it's just like one of those guys could be on the move. There's not a spot for all of them, so one of them could be traded.
Totally. I do think a lot of times, especially Passan's the biggest national baseball writer around right now. I think you write these articles to cast the wide nets of anyone reading, and try to get any name recognized. Like the fact that in the Bo Bichette section, the Mets were mentioned, and Passan said specifically, the Mets aren't ready to move on from Francisco Lindor at shortstop. Like, of course, we know that. We know that for certain, but they could improve at a second or third base. You know what I mean? It's just
it's still written for ESPN people.
Totally. Keeping those mentions out there. No, that's nothing against Passan, but it's about most of the clientele reading this. That's what we're going to try and pick and choose the nuggets that we think are the juiciest and make the most sense with everything else that we've heard be said.
Yeah, I mean, that's why it's so important, to have national writers that are good. One, because he did an incredible job with the article, but two, that's why it's really cool when you have these beat writers, and that's why it's so important to the sport of baseball, or Mets'd podcast, or all these different type of content avenues, because you can get a little more dense, where if Jeff Passan was to dive in specifically on every little niche intricacy of every team, he'd have a 45, 50-page article and no one would ever read that.
And it's also nice that we know last week was the GM meetings. We know Jeff Passan was there. We know that a few days after that, he has all the time to compile 30 teams worth of rumors for every single big free agent. So it's cool to have a big thing like this. And just to not push back on, but to go with what you said before, you trade Brett Baty for an elite piece. Brett Baty is a high-end starting baseball player in this league right now. He's going to be 10 to 15% better than league average with the bat, plus defender, multiple positions. Is a 2 to 3 win player, 100%. Who's a chance to be a 4 to 5 win player if things click anymore. Like, he is a legit piece. If he does move, you're getting something very legit back.
The other problem with including Brett Baty in that is then we now have a hole at third base. So you make a hole to gain a hole, or to fill a hole, whatever that's going to be. And in terms of the available third baseman, the best one is Alex Bregman. And I don't really know if the Mets would be willing to pay the Alex Bregman price. So who would play third base if you got rid of Brett Baty? Because we know it's not Mark Vientos.
I was going to say, I think that this might be a teeny tiny bit of a hint that the Mets might be more interested actually in Bregman than we think. I think that
I know they were linked to him last offseason, right?
They were linked to him last offseason, and he kind of fits the bill of a lot of what we say this team lacks and needs.
Plays good defense.
Plays very good defense. He does make a lot of contact, not necessarily that we want that or don't want that. He is a contact first bat. I don't know if his power will play in Citi Field, but going back and looking at Bregman's career, I know we always, and everyone always goes about the thing that Bregman can't hit on the road. He's always hit nice home ballparks. He's got pretty even home road splits for his career, which I was shocked to see.
And I think this year he actually was better on the road than he was at Fenway Park, weirdly enough, even though that stadium feels so much more friendly for his game, where the home run numbers are still the same. If he played all his games in Citi Field last year, he'd still have 18. I just can't conceptualize him being any sort of power threat. Like, Brett Baty just hits more home runs probably every single year at Citi Field.
He actually probably does. I think Brett Baty does hit more home runs next year. But for Bregman's career at home, 268, 367, 470 slug. That's an 837 OPS. On the road, 277, 363, 490, 853 OPS.
Now, the funny thing about this is to mention Brett Baty, there was no mention of Alex Bregman in the Mets in this article.
Yeah, that was the one thing. Yeah, one thing. But also, like, Bregman does have that, kind of fiery attitude. He has the leadership qualities. He's a good mentor for young players. He's a winner, defense. Like, he does a lot of those things that we say, like, in this nebulous of things that we think the Mets might seek this offseason, but he actually does provide them. Not saying that that is any way connected, related, because, again, in this article, he didn't even link the Mets to Bregman. But if you were to trade Baty, you have to have a plan at third base.
AJ, we're going to do things a little bit differently here. I am wearing the perfect jean. And I remember seeing ads for the perfect jean, like, most comfortable fit ever, perfect fit on your body. And I was like, I'm not buying it. Now, I'm buying it. And we're showing it off on FT.
Please get off my desk, first of all, Scott. Second of all, I was with you. I was skeptical about perfect jean. And then I got a pair, and the fitting was perfect. And my body's not hard to fit because I got a big old rear and big old legs from years of squatting, and they fit perfectly. They're stretchy. They're comfortable. They're fashionable. They're everything I look for in a jean, and now I have an extra pair, and I'm going to wear them all the time.
FOUL15 is the code at theperfectjean.nyc. FT listeners get 15% off your first order, plus free shipping, free returns, and free exchanges when you use code FOUL15 at checkout. That's 15% off for new customers at theperfectjean.nyc with promo code FOUL15. After your purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about them. Please support the show and tell them Foul Territory sent you.
Another big name mentioned as someone who I'd almost be a betting man and say there's a 0% chance he is on this Mets roster when they hit the opening day on the calendar. Kodai Senga.
Yeah.
Quote, he is extremely available, and multiple executives expect him to be traded this winter as the Mets look to overhaul their rotation, which we know the Mets needed to improve rotation. We have a lot of, as we've mentioned, 3s through 5s. Don't have a lot of frontline guys. We thought Kodai Senga could be a frontline guy. Last year was weird. All the comments he was making, the injuries that he's constantly having. It's just, it feels like the relationship is fractured right now. And again, Kodai Senga, not a David Stearns guy. It feels like he's going to be traded this offseason for sure.
Also might not be a Justin Willard guy as a pitching coach that preaches strikes. And there was a team in the Red Sox last year who were kind of against the grain of this splitter revolution that happened across baseball. Didn't throw nearly as many as most other teams in the league. Kodai was a forkball, not exactly a splitter, but a similar behaving pitch to a splitter. It just seems like it's a relationship that may have fractured beyond belief based on the way that last year went, especially the weirdness in spring training that we knew about.
Yeah, Tim Healy had told us before anybody was ever talking about it.
He was like, the Mets don't really trust Kodai Senga, and he seems to be just not really, not that he was playing games, but that it seemed like they weren't ready to rely on him as much as maybe the outside perspective was considering him to be relied upon.
I felt like there was no cohesion between the two. Like what the Mets expected of Kodai and what Kodai expected of the Mets were not on the same page.
And you wonder about the way he was rushed back for the playoffs in 2024. And you wonder about just getting lit up in that Dodger series and kind of being left on the mound as a mop-up guy. I don't know. You never know. You think if you have a season that's taken away by injury, you come back for the postseason, you should go into the offseason ready to go for next year. He missed half of spring training. It's just the whole thing seemed very weird. The way he talks about the way he talks is kind of weird sometimes. Like I don't know. It seems like they're very willing to move on from him at this point.
Yeah, it does. Those are the big names, though, mentioned for trade rumors. Again, I think the one that I'm not buying the most is Brett Baty. All the other guys, though, I totally think, especially because, like, I don't know, the way that Passan also talked about third base for the Mets in this article, too. He's like, they can improve at third. I'm like, yes, they can. But also, like, Brett Baty he still had a really good year. I think that's a classic, like, again, national baseball. If you're not watching all the Mets games, understanding the arc of Brett Baty's season, you could miss what it actually was, which was a really good year. Like that was a legitimate breakout, I feel like, for Baty.
Yeah, I think so too. And on both sides of the ball. But also maybe it's the idea, and again, this will go against some of the things the Mets are talking about. If there's a significant upgrade available at third, and I think they trust Baty enough to play second, and his bat suddenly becomes much more valuable second. The glove becomes much less valuable. This goes against what the kinds of thing the Mets are talking about now. Like I think that the big takeaway from this article is that a lot can happen. I think David Stearns will. I think David Stearns has a very open mind right now. I think we're going to have a lot of possible goodbyes, departures from this ball club that have been there the last few years. I think another really interesting section of this as it pertains to the Mets was the closer section from Passan.
Yep, that was the most because they mentioned Alonso, and Passan's like, the Mets want Alonso back. Like he's going to get paid a lot of money. The Mets want him back.
And I think that after the Josh Naylor contract, like we said in the last episode we gave you guys, it was kind of good for seemingly not Alonso. It was kind of good for the Mets or teams negotiating because it was 5 years for a player younger than Pete Alonso, who is much worse than Pete Alonso. Some people were arguing that Josh Naylor is even, or I don't.
Pete Alonso's worst year was still Josh Naylor's best year. That's what I keep going back to.
And it was the same thing with Christian Walker last year. His best years offensively were the same as Pete Alonso's worst years offensively. The defense, we'll give you guys the defense, but WAR sometimes the calculation for first base and DH types doesn't exactly hit the mark for me because I think their defensive value is lower than other positions on the field, even with the positional. What's the word? The positional
adjustment?
Yeah, with the positional adjustment they give it. And I think
also
hitting 40 homers.
Yeah, and I also feel like for Pete Alonso, like a huge part of his horrible defense, like stop trying to get every single ground ball. Just stay at first, but chill out, relax.
And throwing, which we just gotta get. Maybe we just gotta get in spring training, put him back at third base so we could kind of figure that one out again. Get back into the college minds. But I think that it seems like there was reports about the Red Sox yesterday that they want Alonso or Bregman, which a lot of their fans got mad about. So it's like, all right, you take him back, we take him back. It seems like
let's shake hands. You guys get Bregman, we'll keep Alonso. I'm cool with that.
Before I guess we do the closer thing, because now we've gone on this tangent, there were a couple other teams that Passan linked to Alonso. Some of them being teams like the Reds, who I would again just be shocked if they were actually involved in this, but maybe they will be. There was
especially
a lot of talk about
at the
Pirates spending money.
Yeah, like at the price tag that Pete wants. That would be insane if those two organizations spent the money on Pete when they don't spend it on other players.
But again, like taking the Mets hat off for a second, like good for those teams if they want to spend money.
Yes.
Just don't spend it on Pete Alonso.
Of course, yeah. Like the Reds should be like, how much money do you want, Ellie De La Cruz and Hunter Green to continue to be here for the rest of your time?
And yeah, he mentioned he also mentioned the Mets connected to Murakami, which I thought was interesting
because Stearns kind of put the quash on that, it felt like the other day.
I thought the door may have actually been left open. I do think that I wrote a big profile on when you're talking Murakami from NBC Sports Roller World. I'll put that in the comments somewhere if you guys want to check that out. But I think that his market might be much more suppressed than a lot of people think, especially because he has the shine. I mean, the people called him the Japanese Babe Ruth.
I actually, I think because I did a video the other day for my channel where like I was doing like my hot takes, and a lot of them were that Murakami sucks. And I was like, I think we're now flipping too much.
Way too far.
Too far, because it's like he still hits the ball exceptionally hard. And he's 26. Like there's room for development when he gets here. It's probably not going to be come over
25.
There you go, even more. It's still not going to be like come over and hit 40 home runs his rookie season and be a perennial power hitter immediately. But in a couple seasons, I think he could be very good. And we saw that not the same player, but just the Japanese to MLB move. Like Seiya Suzuki was like a 115 WRC plus guy his first year. And since then he's been like 130s. Like there's an adjustment period for every player that comes over.
There's also been a zone contact metric about Murakami that's been really taken, and people are like, this is the reason he can't be successful. The 73.4% in zone contact rate in Japan, which would have been the lowest among all qualified players in Major League Baseball last year. But someone went back and grabbed Otani's from his last year in Japan, and it was like 74.5%.
Yeah.
So like, very similar, swing for the fences, have the gaudy power. Lance Brazowski put a great video out about this as well. Like there's a lot of interesting stuff about Murakami right now where I do agree with you. And also, part of this is my fault. I put out a stat about Murakami, that guy.
Yeah, you are a little bit of a perpetrator here.
I'm 100% to blame for this one. It went hyperviral. Got 3 million impressions that he had an 0.95 batting average against fastballs over 93.
I also wonder...
It was only 21 batted balls. It was a meaningless stat.
I also wonder what it does for one of these guys, too, where they know they're going to get posted the next year, and it's like, ripping. I'm just going to try and ball out on every single pitch and show you what the ceiling could look like.
Well, I think maybe that happened to Murakami, but in like a multi-year thing. I was expecting we could do a whole video on Murakami, Imai, and
we'll talk about
Akamoto.
him a little more then.
Yeah. But yeah, just give one more thing here, because Murakami had the 56 home run season in 2022. It was the second best in MPB history, only behind the great Vladimir Valentin, 60, the legend, the GOAT. But
WBC legend.
Yeah,
really. Please play for Netherlands again this upcoming year.
That year, Murakami had 21% strikeout rate, 32% whiff, 13% swing strike. The strikeout rate league average in MPB hovers around 19-20% every year. So that year he had average strikeouts, slightly above average swing and miss, with the greatest power the league's ever seen. Since then, the strikeout rate's gone to 30%. The whiff rate's up around over 35%. The swing strike rate last year was over 17%. And players who swing and miss that much in the major leagues, it's mostly a horrific list of Alexander Canario, Jose Siri, Joey Gallo, Zach Geloff, that kind of crew, but then also Rafael Devers and Nick Kurtz.
Yeah.
So it's like there is an avenue for Murakami based on how hard he hits the ball and how much he lifts it. But it's going to be interesting to figure out if he can actually get to that.
All right, let's talk about that Diaz stuff because, again, I also thought that was the next most interesting thing mentioned here because it seems like the Mets want him back, but as Passan says, not maybe back as much as other players.
Yeah, and I think that was the exact line he used. The Mets want Diaz back, but they might not want him as much as other teams or players. So it seems like Diaz is on the Mets list, but he's not the top of the Mets list. It feels like Alonso's the top of the list. Diaz is on the list. And also, Passan reiterated that the 5 for $102 million deal Edwin Diaz is people have said he wants his offseason, similar to when he signed 3 years ago. Not going to happen. He said the ceiling is going to be 4 for $80. That's much more palatable, I think. I think the 5-year deal, like we said to you guys, I don't think anyone in the league was ever going to sign that.
And if they did, that's like, yo, Edwin, good for you. Get your bag. Congratulations. Like, wish we could have had you, but I can't be mad at you for leaving. And then what's going to make Mets fans sick to their stomach, certain Mets fans,
not me,
is the next paragraph. New York is in on Devin Williams. And that's one that you've been talking about a lot, James. And I thought there was a lot of really cool stuff just in general today that came out about Devin Williams. Mike Petriello dropped an article about Devin Williams' season and how kind of two-faced it was while he had like a 6 ERA and at points looked like one of the worst relievers in baseball. When he had inherited runners, they didn't score. He still struck out 35% of the guys. The whiff rate was crazy high. And part of the reason his ERA was so high is that every single time he ever left the game with runners on, the Yankees bullpen just let them score like it was nothing.
And you wonder about a guy like Devin Williams if for his whole career, and this is kind of funny, not bringing the David Stern stuff back into it, he had the best defense in the league behind him.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, you had the Yankee team last year who did not have the best defense in the league. So these kind of tiny little things, we know Devin Williams, how to say this eloquently, mentally sometimes Devin Williams is not, sometimes he's not the most, he does a little Steven Matz on the mound sometimes.
You tell me the guy who punched the wall after the game in the middle of the season is not rational?
He can sulk sometimes. You worry about a guy like Devin Williams where, if Anthony Volpe boots a ball behind him, then all of a sudden, how focused is he in the next 3 pitches? And you
Jason
like
Dominguez has no clue how to play left field. Ball goes over his head on a routine one. You're going to be like, hey, dude, fuck you. What the hell?
But he's going to be great in center field, of course. But also, Passan goes on to say, Williams has soothers from coast to coast. So I think that's an allusion to the Dodgers. I think everyone knows that's a really likely thing too. Though the Mets are mulling the opportunity to sign Diaz and Williams to head up a bullpen in need of a total restructuring. I think that's cool. And another thing that you guys probably will like out there.
I love it too. It's one of my favorite lines.
I'm happy about this, but I know next June I'm going to be like, motherfucker. One closer who won't be returning to the Mets is Ryan Helsley. Though his implosion in New York after the trade deadline hasn't hindered this market. All right. Again, Ryan, the best to you. I know you're a good guy. Wherever you go, hope you find success. Just it will never be here.
No, his time with the New York Mets is definitely over.
Yeah, and then after that, really just kind of
mentioning them with Skubal.
That was it. The titillating thing about Skubal. Like, if this is actually possible, it's the Mets. Yeah. I think Passan basically made that clear. Like, if he becomes available, the Mets will be first in line with a big ticket in their hands, ready to go, big trade package, and largest contract ever for a pitcher at the moment's notice.
Yeah, and he mentioned also that an unnamed reporter's rumors about being hundreds of $1 million away from each other with Skubal. It's not 100% true. He's like, the Tigers aren't going to give him an extension that makes him the highest paid pitcher of all time. He goes, but also it's not as far apart as it was being reported, but that if they move him, they're going to get a decent haul back.
Oh, I love reporter wars this time of year. It's amazing to watch these guys go at each other. And there was
they got to get those guys on. There's got to be someone's got to get those guys on to just scream and yell at each other. We know that Heyman, the unbelievable or whatever he did the one time he was on the radio.
I think it was last year about Soda. About who is this? Steve Summers or who was someone? No,
I think it was actually our second favorite guy on the radio.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I think I can see that.
KMP.
Ah, I love that. Yeah, that actually was exactly what it was. Hey,
which he baited him hard.
Yeah. Tip the cap, credit where it's due. And just some other notes here that could be somewhat relevant for the Mets from this. They said that teams were worried about Ranger Suarez for a long-term contract, which I guess that makes total sense considering the guy throws 90 poo.
And has thrown 150 innings, like most in his career.
Yeah. Zach Wheeler's contract for the Phillies is a similar comp for what teams expect Zach Cease to get.
Zach Cease? Who?
Oh, Dylan Cease, Jesus Christ. Zach Cease. Oh, God, this is the first thing I'm doing in the morning. CJ Abrams and Mackenzie Gore are both very available. I don't know how much those exactly play into the Mets, but I think it's interesting that that's probably going to happen. Joe Ryan or Pablo Lopez will be traded, likely not both. And Luis Robert, still very available.
Yeah. Very, very much available. And the Mets seem to be, again, interested in basically anyone that is everyone. They are looking to make this roster look different than last year. So I know people won't believe it until they see it, and that's fine. That's cool. But just when it does happen, remember that was David Stearns making those moves, because no one wants to give him credit for anything.
And remember, also, if the team looks different from last year and people are like, I can't believe they don't have this guy or that guy on the team anymore, we stink, we're so much worse. Just remember 2 years ago how bad it felt going into that season, how good that season wound up. Like, also, baseball, gotta be a team.
We didn't make the playoffs last year.
Yeah, big changes needed.
Yeah, I'm really okay if the team doesn't look like it did in 2025. 2025 sucked. That was one of the worst Mets seasons of recent memory.
Yeah, just Mets fans, this offseason, I think it's going to be a task for all of us to be open-minded, because I think that's how this organization is entering this offseason.
Mets fans have always been known as open-minded individuals.
Yes, open-minded, very willing to take in new information and come back out with it. Like, it's all going to be very fun offseason for us.
But that's pretty much it. We wanted to come to you guys with a little quick thing from Jeff Passan, best reporter in the game. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Whenever we get updates, we'll be dropping new episodes, so make sure you are subscribed to Mets'd Up, not just on YouTube, but also if you want to listen to the audio version, Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google. Context, the YouTube video is going to come out earlier than the audio for this one, because it's just we're not dropping an audio at like 5 p.m. That's not going to happen. You'll get it tomorrow morning if you want to listen. But if not, subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can follow James on social media at
James Shiano.
And I'm Giraffe Neck Mark with a C. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you for listening. We'll catch you on the next one. Peace out.
Peace out, guys. Let's go Mets.